Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our weekly office hours. My name is George Soto, one of the co-founders here at AssetMule, joined by my awesome co-founder and CEO, Justin Dorfman, and our awesome guest, which I'll dig into here in a second. But real quick, for the folks out there who are trying to figure out homepage messaging that resonates, that's what we're going to dive into today. We're going to cover Garrett Jestice's awesome 4 steps to B2B homepage messaging. And get real quick, I just got to give you a shout out because number one, like you helped us through our customer discovery process. Maybe last year or so, you gave some really
Yeah.
great feedback. And I remember going, God, this guy knows his shit. Like it is awesome. And there's a distinction between folks who have read a lot of like LinkedIn posts over the last 24 months or read a bunch of books. Nothing against books, but there's
Yeah.
just a distinction between like understanding intellectually information and concepts and then having done it. And you're one of the individuals out there who have done it. You've done it multiple times over the years and now are helping organizations through Prelude Marketing to do so. So without further ado, why don't you just tell folks super quickly a little bit about that incredible background, and then we can dive into this framework.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I mean, I'll pay you your money that I promised you after for saying all
Yeah.
those nice things for me. You know what I mean? No, so my background's in early stage B2B SaaS mostly. And I kind of fell into the consulting thing about 2.5 years ago, and I've really enjoyed it. And so I really work on go-to-market foundations for early stage companies. And so what does that include? It's a lot of the figuring out who their audience is, figuring out what to say, messaging and positioning, figuring out which channels to focus on, figuring out which offers to focus on. And so I've really enjoyed that stuff. And the pace of learning, kind of like you said, just being able to do it with so many clients over and over, my pace of learning has just skyrocketed, accelerated, because I'm just constantly testing new things. So anyways, happy to show some things that I have learned and tested. And again, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to show today isn't all strictly from me. Like there's a lot of really great thought leaders out there, and I'm constantly learning from them and kind of pulling some of their frameworks and testing it and tweaking it. So anyways, I'll walk through it today and kind of show you some of the stuff that I found that really works.
Awesome. And real quick for the folks out there, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, you're probably watching this on LinkedIn or YouTube. Just go ahead and add those to the comments and we'll grab them and, probably address them throughout the course of the conversation. But otherwise, if we, depending on how this goes today, we'll definitely allocate time at the end to Q&A. So yeah, Justin, I know you have a lot just because you've been working on all our messaging and website and so on.
Yeah, I was going to say, Garrett, if you want to pull up your framework while you're doing that, the reason why we reached out to Garrett is over the last year, we've really, I think, at AssetMule, gained a lot of knowledge on who our ideal customer profile is and what our sort of point of view is on the market. And to the point now where our messaging, when I look on our website, it's not what we're speaking to on calls and demos and with prospects and what we're working on in the product. It's not like super far removed from it, but it's, we definitely have a much more crystallized point of view. And, we're starting to work on that next version. And, Garrett, you're somebody that I often speak to when I'm trying to figure things out, because like George said, I just find you have a way of taking the complex and simplifying it and making it very sort of clear in these frameworks. And you shared that framework with me, and I was like, man, we need to like share this with the world. Like this is really, really awesome. So excited to dig in. Do have a ton of questions, but I'll hold off for now as you sort of take the lead here, and then we can chat more about the questions.
Cool. Love it. Well, yeah, excited to dive into this. So I'm just going to walk you through some slides that, stuff that I've learned as I've tested different messaging across different B2B homepages, right? Working with clients, working on my own, all of that stuff. So I'll jump into this. Feel free to jump in if you guys have any questions, and let me know if there's questions in the chat. We can dive into it. Again, we'll leave some time at the end. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to today, right, is at the end, Justin, we talked about this. This is your idea. We're going to actually do kind of almost like a live roast, right, of the AssetMule homepage. I'll preface to that and say, I think you guys have a pretty good homepage today, and I know you're working on updating it, but there's definitely some opportunities for improvement. So after we go through this today, we're going to talk through that live and look at it. So I'm looking forward to that. So, all right, well, let's jump into this. You guys already, I just told you a little bit about me. This is some of my background, right? So I've been in early stage B2B SaaS. The best thing to know about me is I'm fortunate, I'm blessed, I'm married way up, and I have 4 awesome kids. And that's kind of my primary focus and job. People sometimes ask me what my hobbies are outside of work, and I don't have many because I'm hanging out with my kids. I coach some sports teams and stuff like that, and that's been awesome. Really enjoyed it. But this is where I kind of came up and learned. I kind of came up through a product marketing role and then was the chief marketing officer at some early stage companies. So jumping into this though, I thought this was so interesting. I saw a recent study by the founder of Winter. If you guys are familiar with Winter, Pete Blaja, and he posted a couple months ago about a study that they did that 100% of the buyers in their study visited the vendor website before purchasing. And, it's not that surprising, but anytime you see 100%, it's like, whoa, crazy. Like, are you serious? That's a lot, right? It just points out to me how crucial your website messaging is, especially your homepage, for helping prospects take action. It's the thing that really connects them to your solution. It's the first place that everyone goes. Think of the last time you bought something. You're going to the homepage and you're checking it out. So making sure that you have really crisp messaging that communicates the right value and story is so key there. So for anyone listening, I want you to pull up your homepage right now if you're on a computer, or even just think through it right now and ask these questions to yourself. Does your homepage clearly answer these questions for all visitors? There's more that you can answer, but these ones are the core ones. What is it? Who's it for? What's the main value you promise? And what makes it different from alternatives that I'm considering, right? Those are the core questions that anyone's going to have when they come to your homepage, especially. And so you have to make sure that you clearly answer those for the people who are visiting. So we'll get into that a little bit more. I want to walk you through this though, because, a lot of times people talk about, what's the difference between positioning, messaging, copy, your point of view, your problem that you solve, all of that stuff. And what I've found is really there's 4 parts to effective messaging, right? And all these pieces kind of fit together and they help you to create a really effective homepage. So the first is your point of view. Your point of view is really about why you exist. It's rooted in a core problem that you solve. We'll talk about that in more detail. Positioning is really the strategic where you're choosing to play. So again, it's some of those core questions. What do you do? Who it's for? What's it replace? How's it different? Messaging is really how you communicate the core value that you provide, right? And so benefits, features, value props, that type of stuff. And then copy is really how you say it. So often you adapt your core messaging for the different channels or for your brand personality. And that's really where copy comes in. So all of these are important, but they really build on each other. So I want to walk through it in a little bit more detail. So point of view is really about why your solution exists. And the core idea here is that a strong point of view starts with a really painful problem that someone feels is worth solving, right? So this simple graphic kind of illustrates that. There's a struggling moment that someone has. They want to make progress. They want to get to that other side. There's maybe a new way of doing it that you can provide. And it's really rooted in that problem that they have that's, again, worth solving. There's a lot of problems every day that all of us have that aren't worth solving, right? That we don't want to pay for to solve. And so it's key in making sure that you find the right people with the right problem that you can solve and really orient your point of view around that. And so let me show you a quick example of what this looks like. I worked with a company called Elate. They're a software company. They do strategic execution software. So you think about OKRs, right? Mid-sized companies that are doing like business OKRs and strategic planning. How do they roll it out to the entire org? They have software that kind of helps with that. And so as we went through this, we went through a couple of things. They're often selling through to a chief of staff or head of strategy at these types of companies. And so we went through and tried to personify the problem that they solve. We did a 5 W's problem statement. So who, what, where, when, all that stuff, right? And a couple of things stood out, right? So I highlighted it in yellow here, but that chief of staff is often trying to ensure that they're actually executing on the strategy that the company's built. They're not just checking boxes, shipping slide decks. If you've worked in a mid-size org, you know a lot of times that happens, right? Individual teams might plan their stuff and then you kind of move on, and maybe you do it, maybe you don't, right? And so really what they're focused on is that struggle of turning plans into action. Okay, so those are some of the insights we had when talking to their customers and talking to their team. And so really what it ended up in is this point of view statement that we landed on. And it really came from some of those insights in terms of the problems that they solve. And so you can read it here. I'm not going to go through it, but essentially, like this is the problem that we decided that they're solving, and we've oriented that in a point of view statement, right? And so when someone who is their target audience, that chief of staff, comes here and reads this, we know it's going to resonate because these are the problems that we heard they're feeling, right? And so again, that's an example of a point of view statement that's really rooted in that core problem. All right, I'm going to move on here. So positioning is really where you choose to play. And so positioning, one of the key things to know about positioning is it's about focus and sacrifice. It's not about your long-term vision. It will evolve over time. So on the right side of the screen there, I thought this is so interesting. These are where some popular companies initially focused, like what their initial positioning was focused on. And maybe some of you have seen this before. This is from the Fletch guys. If you follow them, they're a great follow on LinkedIn. So Airbnb started focusing on budget travelers attending meetups in New York City. Amazon, as you might know, they focused on internet shoppers, and this is in 95, buying books. eBay, solo small shops selling collector's items. So you can see the examples there. So you will evolve over time. Positioning is not about what you hope to be or what your vision is. It's about spaces you can own in the near term, usually in the next year or two. And so what is positioning? It really comes down to 4 essential questions and being able to answer those questions. First is, what is it? And normally you answer that through describing your category, your primary use case. Who is it for? It's usually the persona and the ICP, the company type, if you're in the B2B environment. What does it replace? It's understanding the primary alternatives and what the problems with those alternatives are. And then 4 is, how is it different or better? Different is usually better than better, right? And so being able to summarize your solution and what makes it different is an ideal part of positioning. And so here's a quick example. Again, I won't walk through this in detail. This is another client that I worked with. They're actually an agency. They do custom development. And so there's a lot of custom dev shops out there that work with companies. These guys actually really decided to focus on a unique use case. And so what they found is a lot of companies, especially manufacturing, agricultural type companies, industrial services, they build custom internal operations software. So it can be anything from a sales quoting tool to, their own version of an HR software or whatever it is. But then they have a hard time maintaining that software. And so they chose to really focus on the expert ongoing software and maintenance, right? And they were focused on becoming a long-term partner with, these clients who they were helping. So again, you can see the breakdown here, but this is just a quick example of what their positioning looked like. All right, let's move on. The next piece is messaging. So messaging, again, is what you say. And so there's 3 core parts of messaging. I'm going to use a Star Wars analogy here to kind of describe this. I think this is great. This actually came from Make It Punchy. So there's a book called Make It Punchy, which I think is really awesome. And I'll highlight it here in a minute, but I love this analogy. So I wanted to share it. So using Star Wars, right? Your features are something special your solution has or can do. So that's like the Force in Star Wars, right? The Force is like a feature. Benefits are something new your customer can do, be, or feel thanks to that feature. So I don't know if you remember this scene. I just rewatched this with some of my kids recently. Rey is running from, this TIE fighter ship that's coming after her. Last second, she does a backflip over the ship and chops off the wing. And so the ship crashes, right? So that crazy backflip that Rey can do with the Force is a benefit, right? It's a benefit of the Force, something that she can do thanks to the feature. And then the value proposition is like a big win your customers can achieve with your solution. So like defeating Darth Vader and bringing peace to the galaxy, that might be like the big value proposition, the big win for them, right? And so the formula for really clear messaging usually is having 1 value proposition, 3 benefits, and then 2 to 3 supporting features for each of those benefits. And that's it. That's how you can describe clearly what you do. You might have other features that aren't shown here, right? You might have other things that you want to highlight, but in really clear messaging, you focus on the things that make you different. And so you focus on the features and the benefits here that are different from alternatives, right? And I'll talk through that. So how do you do that? This is one of the things that I found that's been most helpful. So how do you go about defining those? The first thing I would do is start by mapping your customer's typical workflow. So if you sell software or if you sell services in a B2B environment, you're basically augmenting or replacing a workflow. Almost every B2B software or services are replacing or augmenting a current workflow, right? Someone's trying to accomplish something at work and you're helping them do it better. And so if you can map out what that looks like with and without your solution, what those steps are, then you can start to identify what are the pains with each of the steps in that workflow. As someone goes through that, what are the things that are frustrating, right? And then you can start to map that to your features, right? What are the features that you have that solve those individual pains? And then you can distill those connections down into key themes or ideas. And then from those ideas, you can choose the one that is the best for your value proposition. And you're going to need to tweak and refine it a little bit. And then you choose the themes that are most relevant for your solution's benefits, right? And then you want to adjust them so they tell a cohesive story. But starting with that workflow is what I found most helpful in really mapping out the right features, the right benefits, the right value proposition to highlight. So here's a quick example, again, from that same dev company that I showed you a minute ago. It's called Northbuilt. And so the main value proposition we identified, again, when talking to some of their best customers, is they had a lot of tech anxiety for managing their custom built software. And so Northbuilt helps them eliminate that. They can focus on running and growing their business, and Northbuilt takes care of managing their software. And so you can see some of the benefits that they really cared about and some of the features that reinforced each of those benefits that map to each of those, right? Okay, last piece here, and then we'll get into some of this fun stuff. So copy is really how you say it, right? And so again, one of the things that we all get caught up in is jargon. And so this is one of my favorite things, and I've actually used this in AI a lot, but being able to say it like your customer would to a friend at a barbecue. If you want to use AI, sometimes I like to tell AI, say it like this customer would to a friend at a barbecue. And it helps remove a lot of that jargon, right? Removes that corporate speak, those buzzwords and hype, that internal lingo that we use, that deep tech talk. So being able to remove that helps with clarity in your copy. And then looking for places to strategically punch up your copy can also help too, right? Finding places to evoke emotion, to swap in the unexpected, using a term like awesomeness, right? Rhyming, repetition, alliteration can help. Painting a picture, showing the pro without the con, mixing up the pace, dropping in parentheses. These are all things that you can kind of experiment with. And really, really great copywriters, this is what they can help with, right? And so I know we're going to talk about this, Justin, in a minute, but I think that AI can definitely play a role in helping with messaging. I don't think that it can replace a really great copywriter or copy editor yet. And so I think that it's important to have a human in the mix that can kind of help refine some of this stuff. Okay, so if you want to go deeper on any of this stuff, again, I've learned a ton from a lot of people out there. These are a couple of books. Make It Punchy by Emma Stratton. Obviously Awesome by April Dunford, and a lot of her work. And then like a classic OG one is stuff by Al Reese and Jack Trout. So this positioning book, Battle for Your Mind, is super awesome. So with that, I want to switch direction a little bit. And the last thing we want to do is I want to talk through, okay, we have all those pieces of positioning, messaging, point of view, copy. Now, how do you bring them all together on a really good homepage? And then we're going to go through the AssetMule homepage after this. So this is the simplest version of a good homepage that I have seen and tested over time. There is definitely other stuff that you can add to a homepage, but if you want to start at the bare minimum, this is the stuff that you need. So in your hero section, everything above the fold, right? You have your ICP's main goal expressed as a benefit. Often it answers, now you can what? If you can finish that sentence for your customers, what would they say? Now you can what? What's the thing that they want to achieve, right? What's that goal? And then your description underneath it is usually a boilerplate description that answers these questions. What is it? Who's it for? Why should they care? What's the benefit to them? Making sure you have an image or video or GIF that reinforces that same message and doesn't distract is also key. And then making sure that you have some social validation that also reinforces who it's for. And often that's trusted by with some logos, right? The next is you highlight your point of view. So this is where you show that you really understand the problem, the main problem that your best customers face. And so that's like that point of view statement that's rooted in the problem that I walked you through. And after you pitch and show the problem, then you can introduce your solution. And you frame that by talking about your value proposition, that big win that customers can achieve, and then breaking that down with each of the benefits and the features that reinforce each of those benefits, right? Again, you might not have all of the features listed here. You're going to focus on the ones that differentiate you the most compared to your primary alternatives. And then, of course, after that, you need some additional social proof. This is to really build trust, reinforce that core message, and explain who you're for. Really good social proof does all of those things. It's about who said it. Does it relate to the main benefit, right? And does it help really build that trust that someone's looking for? And then lastly, having a final call to action. It's probably similar to the call to action that you had on top. Sometimes you could have different layers of calls to action. You don't want to have too many though. And so we'll talk about that. Usually a primary and a secondary are all you should have. But being able to reinforce that with a question often is a great way to end with the CTA. So what's the dream outcome, or what pain do your ICPs, your best customers, want to avoid, right? If you can phrase that as a question, then have that final CTA. That's one of the best ways to end your page. So with that, I want to do a quick test for anyone on here. I am going to show you a screenshot of AssetMule's current homepage, everything above the fold. And then I'm going to ask you a couple of seconds. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to look at this, and then I'm going to ask you some questions. So here we go. Okay, that is called a 10-second test. And one of the things that you can do is you can take everything above the fold, show it to a random person, show it to them for 10 seconds, and then pull it away and see how closely they can answer these questions, how accurate they can answer these questions. So if you're listening, let me know in the chat what your response to these questions are for AssetMule. What is it? Who's it for? What's the main value that they promise? And a bonus would be, what are the main alternatives and what makes it different from those alternatives? Sometimes that doesn't show up in the above the fold in the header. But if you can answer that, that can be a bonus. So Justin, any people typing in chat yet? If not, we'll jump into this and go through it in a little more detail.
We'll give it a couple more seconds here. It's funny because as you're going through this, I'm thinking both about our current and our future, and like new ideas are sparking for sure. And I'm seeing where the gaps are. So if we don't get any here, I'm happy to also not like obviously answer these questions, but like share where I think we're missing some gaps. I'm interested in hearing your take as well, Garrett. But I do see some areas where we can be a lot more crisp with some of these answers.
Love it. Cool. Well, I'd love to also let's just go through the rest of your homepage. Because again, this is cool. This is what we should be able to answer. But at the end of the day, there's some stuff that you're doing that's really good, and also probably some stuff that you could tweak as you're working on the next version. So let me switch.
Garrett, I'll Venmo you after.
Yeah.
But this time we will Venmo you for telling us what we're missing rather than being nice.
There you go. Okay, let me share my screen again. I just got to do the other tab, and I'll walk you through this.
I think that's what you learn as a founder, right? Is like the good stuff is when it hurts, not when it's like praising.
I know it is. So, okay. So let's walk through this in a little bit more detail. So what did you guys notice? Justin, George, like as we walked through this, like what stood out to you? What could you improve?
So a couple things for me. So one, it's a little bit lower, but like in the header, we're not very clear on who it's for, right? The next section where it says, trusted by
right here
is a little bit more clear. But one thing that I've always struggled with, and it's actually a question that we just got from Gokul in the chat is when you're selling to multiple buyer personas, right? And I really struggle with this with the messaging as well, or like the copy specifically is like, I really try and put myself in the buyer's shoes, and I'm trying to figure out like which buyer out of, like in our world, we're selling to product marketers and we're selling to salespeople. The product marketers essentially adopt our product to create the sales asset templates, to build the snippet library of messaging. And then the salespeople use those templates to create personalized assets, share it with prospects, track. So, when I'm writing the copy, like whose shoes am I putting, my feet in, right? And if I go kind of across the two, am I diluting the messaging is always where I struggle.
Yeah. And so I think you are. I think you'll have more impactful messaging if you pick the right audience to focus on. So there's two ways that I would kind of answer this, right? The first is, who's your champion? If the product marketer in your case is the main champion who's coming, who's signing up, the first thing you should do is speak to the needs of the champion, right? My guess is like salespeople might get involved after a product marketer creates assets and then they go in and customize it, right? And so speak to the needs of the product marketer first, since they're your champion. The second piece, though, is I talked about being able to map the workflow, right? Sometimes you can talk to the different people who were involved through the lens of the workflow, right? So like I noticed actually on your page down here, similar sort of thing. Like if we come down here, some of these are written for the product marketer, right? Some of these first ones, but then it switches to like personalizing assets and engaging with buyers, which is probably for the salesperson, right? So if that's the case, just call out who that is doing that and frame it in the way of the typical workflow. One of the best ways to do that is, a lot of times I think it's actually the best way to, if you have a dedicated product page, you communicate your features through the lens of the typical workflow, right? And so what does that workflow look like? And what are the features that you have that improve upon the pains that they feel in that current workflow, right?
That makes a lot of sense. The other thing that I noticed as well is, if you go back to the top, to the header, I think we're doing a decent job on point of view here and like what we're replacing, and maybe touching on benefits, but I think we're missing the ultimate value prop, right? So like engaging your buyers, so what, right? Like to win more business, to close, book more meetings, right? Or whatever the value prop is that is a result of that benefit, I think we're missing here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a little bit of refinement here. The other thing I would say, you highlighted this, but I think that this is actually really good. You can't see it above the fold though. And so one of the things you could do, a small thing, is shrink this image a little bit so you can see ideally, some reinforcement of who this is for. You can add it in here in your paragraph up here, your main paragraph as well. And you probably should do both, but often having those there so you can see it can help, right? So, the other thing, I'll walk through a couple other ideas as I just go through this. B2B product marketing and sales teams is a pretty broad ICP, right? And so the better you understand who your sweet spot is, the more specifically you want to speak to that. Is it actually product marketers because they're the main champions? And is it actually any B2B product marketers, or is there a size too of company, right? Or a mindset that they have? Is it the founding product marketers for whatever reason that are the best fit? So as you speak to the center of the bullseye of like who your best fit customer is, it'll attract other people, but it only strengthens your message for those people who are best fit for it. So
yeah, and on that one, like it is, we tend to find founding solo small product marketing teams, but like I think there's a little fear there, right? And this is very common of like, man, like if we go deep on that, what if there's like a mid-market enterprise one that could benefit from this? Are we like turning them off, trying the solution? But like, I'd rather have a higher conversion rate with those that we know we do well with, right? So that's definitely a really good point.
The tour is awesome. That's next level stuff. Like, I think that that's super, super helpful. This again is kind of like your point of view or your problem. I think it's good. There's probably more detail you can bring into this to really drive home the painful points, right? Old way, new way is a really good way to show and highlight the change or the problem, there's probably more you could do here. This is one thing that's small, but I hate using headers, main lines for generic information that doesn't communicate your value. Like, what can you do with AssetMule, right? I would switch those lines only because most people scan, right? And so they only read the headers of each section. And so what can you do with AssetMule doesn't actually communicate anything to them, but the line underneath it, create personalized interactive sales assets that engage buyers and win more business, is something that adds value, right?
Makes so much sense. Yeah.
Again, we walked through this, but like, who are you speaking to on each of these and being clear, or describing it through the lens of a workflow. I love that, again, this is next level stuff, but having metrics on here that communicate some of the ROI or the benefits is, again, awesome. Next level stuff that a lot of companies your size don't usually have. So that's amazing. Different use cases, right? This could be different audiences. It could also be different use cases that you have for it, are key. One piece that's kind of missing from here, that's, again, it's kind of a next level thing, but a simple how it works section.
Yeah.
Like how does it actually work in 3 to 4 steps? That's it, right? After you sign up, what do you have to do, right? And sometimes you can focus that on a primary use case too, right? Like for you guys, as you are replacing static PDFs, maybe the main use case or the first use case that someone's going to have is actually uploading their PDF to start to track it. So maybe you highlight that use case and then describe others. I don't know, right?
Yeah, so, makes a lot of sense.
I know we're close on time here. Last couple of thoughts. Love this too, like why we built AssetMule. Usually when you have an about us or company page, that's where this would live. You don't have that today, right? But that would be the next step, is probably breaking this out and putting it on an about us or company page. And then the last thing I will say is your calls to action are a little bit all over the place. You don't have the same calls to action at the bottom here. This is great to be able to like read our blog, but if you look throughout this page, you actually have 3 or 4 different calls to action, right? You have a sign up here at the very top. You have get started free. You have book a demo. So what's the primary action you want someone to take? And then there can always be a secondary one. So that could be view our demo, sign up free, but usually you only want 2 of those, right? So anyways, hopefully that's helpful. This has been super awesome kind of walking through it. And I think you guys are doing a good job.
Awesome. Well, I think it's a good starting point, but it's definitely got my wheels turning for where we go next. Now I have a clear direction. I know we're out of time today, but maybe George, you can wrap us up. And if there are questions, follow-up questions, this recording is going to live live on LinkedIn. So add to the comments, tag Garrett, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just DM me for sure. Happy to follow up and answer any.
Actually, that's what I was going to say for the folks out there. Please follow Garrett. Please follow Prelude Marketing. You can check it out. Just go to Garrett's profile and follow both the company and Garrett. And Garrett is, again, just dropping wisdom and knowledge on a daily basis. Is at least that's what the algorithm is so excited about your content. That's what it's doing. It's pushing it every day. So thank you so much to the folks out there. I saw there were quite a few folks who have tuned in. So really appreciate your time. If you are not an AssetMule user, you can definitely check it out, right? It's completely free to get started. Just go to assetmule.ai and sign up and kick the tires on it. If you are an existing customer or user, we really appreciate it. We also spend a lot of time on content and trying to bring experts to you folks out there like Garrett to help you with your go-to-market strategies and motions. So definitely click on the follow button here on LinkedIn if you have not done so, or subscribe, or I should say, or subscribe on YouTube. So without further ado, have a wonderful, wonderful day, and shout out to Silicon Slopes over in Utah. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.